I groggily opened my eyes and saw that the room in front of me was covered with red double happiness decorations. A half-torn calendar hung on the white wall, and the date marked on it was June 20th, 1986. Seeing that date made my heart clench painfully. So, I had been reborn to the day I married Lucas Johnson. I knew that tomorrow morning, Lucas would announce to the entire family a decision that would shock everyone. He planned to quit his job as a factory worker and dive into business. That very decision would alter my entire life. After resigning, he partnered with his first love, Evelyn Reed, to start selling clothes. Together, they became hugely successful in the clothing industry. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, the two of them rekindled their romance in secret. I, on the other hand, was left carrying the title of Mrs. Johnson, living a life of solitary suffering for 30 years. I even spent over 2 decades taking care of his demanding, bedridden parents. Thinking about all this made my heart ache even more. In my previous life, I had worked myself to the bone for the Johnson family, only to be mistreated and discarded in the end. It just wasn't worth it. This time, I decided to step aside and let Lucas and his precious Evelyn take care of his troublesome parents when they inevitably became bedridden. I was done playing the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law. Knowing that Lucas wouldn't return home that night, I pulled up the quilt and went to sleep. Strangely, I slept exceptionally well. Perhaps because I had already resolved to change everything. There was no more indecision or anxiety like in my past life. The next morning, when I opened the door, I saw Lucas and his parents sitting in the yard, as though they had never left. Lucas, at 22 years old, still had that youthful vitality. His sharp features carried a boyish charm, and his appearance alone could captivate anyone at first glance. When he saw me, his handsome brows furrowed, and the playful gleam in his eyes was replaced with a stern, warning look. Seeing his guarded expression made my chest tighten once again. I silently reminded myself not to love him anymore, and not to care about him. But after so many years of loving and following him, worrying about him had become second nature. I lowered my head and let out a self-deprecating laugh. This bad habit of mine had to change. Starting now. I knew he was worried I'd tell his parents that he hadn't come home last night, but I had already decided to separate from him, so there was no need to waste my breath on such trivial matters. Besides, even if I did speak up, what would change? His parents never took my side anyway. They thought a girl from the countryside like me was lucky just to marry into their family. So what if I suffered? Lucas's parents didn't look pleased when they saw me. I knew they were about to give me the usual lecture. Since I had already decided to leave Lucas, I didn't want to make a scene. I walked over and obediently greeted them. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry I woke up late. I'll go make breakfast now. Lucas's mom let out a cold snort. What's the use of having a daughter-in-law who sleeps in on the first day? Are you trying to starve me to death? Lucas, you'd better teach your wife properly. Lucas, feeling guilty, didn't say anything. His mom scolded me a bit more before finally letting me go to the kitchen. I kept my head down the entire time and didn't say a word. Lucas's eyes were filled with surprise, as if he couldn't understand why I didn't seize the chance to complain. Wasn't I always the one who cared the most about him? In the past, even if he came home late, I would have made a big scene, ensuring the whole yard knew about it. But now, I simply ignored him and went to the kitchen to cook. Still, I could feel his probing gaze lingering on me for a long time. During breakfast, Lucas finally made the announcement that I had been waiting for. Mom, Dad, I've decided to quit my job and start a business with Mr. Brown. Lucas's declaration immediately triggered an outburst of fury from his father. Robert Johnson, are you out of your mind? He roared. You want to quit a perfectly good job as a factory worker to become some freelance businessman? Do you have any idea how many people would kill for a stable government job? And here you are, trying to run away from it. And that so-called Mr. Brown from Guangdong. He's clearly a smooth-talking fraud. How could you even think of starting a business with someone so unreliable? Lucas wasn't fazed by his father's anger. Dad, Mr. Brown was introduced to me by Evelyn Reed, my high school classmate. How could he be unreliable? You don't know the situation. So stop making wild assumptions. Robert's face turned red with rage. Evelyn? That girl is just a naive little thing. What could she possibly know about business? Hearing his father speak poorly of Evelyn, Lucas lowered his head, visibly upset. His mother, Karen Johnson, stepped in to mediate. Lucas, don't be impulsive. What's so great about going into business? Staying at the factory is stable and secure. Besides, you and Susan just got married. How are you going to find time to focus on a business? At the mention of me, Lucas's gaze shifted to mine, and his eyes narrowed in disdain. What does being married have to do with it? Marriage doesn't mean a man can't pursue his career. A real man won't let a woman hold him back. Look around. Everyone in business is making a fortune. If I wait any longer, it'll be too late. He glared at me with resentment. Susan, let me make this clear. Don't get in my way, or I'll hate you for the rest of my life. I smirked coldly to myself. In this lifetime, I wouldn't stop him. He could go pursue his dreams for all I cared. It wasn't my problem. In my past life, I had listened to his parents and discouraged him from working with Mr. Brown, the man introduced by his first love, Evelyn. He held that against me for years, blaming me for making him miss out on a golden opportunity, even when it turned out that Mr. Brown was a scammer, and everyone who partnered with him suffered losses. Lucas never thanked me. This time, I decided to let him go ahead and face the consequences of his choices. Let him see how things would unfold when Evelyn's recommendation led to disaster. Would he still think of her as his soulmate and benefactor, like he did in the past? With this thought, I set down my chopsticks and spoke calmly. Mom, Dad, I support Lucas's decision. The room fell silent. 3 incredulous voices echoed at once. What? I paused briefly, then continued. Lucas is an adult. I trust that he has carefully considered this decision. Times are changing, and starting a business isn't necessarily a bad idea. The entire Johnson family stared at me as if I were a ghost. Lucas looked especially stunned. Ever since I came to the city 6 months ago to work and met my fiancé, I had clung to him as if my life depended on it, constantly demanding his attention. He couldn't comprehend why I was now so quick to agree with his plan to leave for another city and start a business. Before Lucas could make sense of my unexpected behavior, Robert slammed his chopsticks down on the table and bellowed. No, absolutely not. And if anyone dares to bring this up again, I'll break their legs. Despite my silence, Lucas's father's opposition meant he wouldn't get his way this time, even without my interference. After Robert stormed off, Karen sighed heavily and followed him, leaving just Lucas and me at the dining table. Lucas stared at me for a moment before letting out a cold laugh. Susan Knight, don't think I don't see through your little schemes. I raised an eyebrow, confused. What are you talking about? Lucas leaned in slightly, his sneer deepening. You're hoping I'll go off and fail so you can watch me crash and burn, aren't you? His words confirmed my suspicions, but I simply looked back at him, calm and unbothered. Lucas continued, his voice dripping with contempt. You think I don't know what you're trying to do? Supporting me all of a sudden, acting like you've changed your mind. It's just a trick, isn't it? You're hoping that I'll go out there, lose everything, and come crawling back humiliated. I tilted my head slightly, meeting his gaze with indifference. Believe what you want. Lucas, I'm just respecting your choices. What happens next is up to you. My calmness seemed to frustrate him even more. He narrowed his eyes, searching for any hint of mockery or deceit, but found none. Finally, he scoffed and leaned back in his chair. Fine. Let's see who gets the last laugh. I didn't respond, nor did I show any reaction. I had no intention of fighting or arguing. In this lifetime, I was done trying to win his favor or prove anything to him. He could make his choices, and I would make mine. The weight of my past life sacrifices and heartbreaks was enough to remind me that I didn't owe him anything. Not my love, my support, or even my anger. After a moment, Lucas stood up abruptly and left the table, slamming the door behind him. I remained seated, quietly finishing my meal, already preparing myself for the changes to come. This time, I wouldn't be the one left suffering in silence. If Lucas wanted to pursue his ambitions, let him. But I was no longer the woman who would sacrifice herself to clean up his mess. I didn't expect you to pick up such manipulative tricks after just a few days in the city. Lucas sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. This whole strategy of retreating to advance. Pretty clever. Huh? You agreed to me quitting my job and going into business just to provoke my dad into stopping me. That way, you'd ensure I couldn't partner with Mr. Brown. Susan, you're disgusting. I'll never like you. His eyes were filled with contempt. And in that moment, I was reminded of the look he gave me on the day I died in my previous life. It was the same scorn, the same disdain. I clenched my fists tightly, digging my nails into my palms to suppress the searing pain in my chest. Then, with a steady voice, I finally said the words I had been longing to say since the moment I was reborn. Lucas Johnson, let's get a divorce. His voice immediately rose in shock. What did you just say? I swallowed the lump in my throat and repeated firmly. I said, let's get a divorce. Lucas stared at me, dumbfounded. I met his gaze and continued. I know you've never truly liked me. You're a high school graduate, a city boy, while I'm just a country girl with only a middle school education. I've thought it through. Binding two completely incompatible people like us together through marriage isn't fair to either of us. So, let's end this amicably. Lucas let out a cold snort. So, you finally realize you're not good enough for me? At least you've got some self-awareness. But in the next moment, his brows furrowed deeply, and he glared at me with suspicion. Susan, I don't know what game you're playing now, but there's no way you seriously want a divorce. Who do you think you're fooling? Is this fun for you? I looked directly into his eyes, my expression calm and unwavering. I'm not playing games. I mean it. If you don't believe me, we can go get the divorce certificate right now. Lucas's gaze darkened as he scrutinized me, as if trying to peer into my soul. I didn't flinch. My resolve was clear. Yes, I wanted a divorce. I wanted to leave the Johnson family, the cage that had trapped me for 30 long years in my past life. I was curious to see how Evelyn would handle the role of Mrs. Johnson after I left. Could she do better than I had? My demeanor was flawless, leaving Lucas unable to find a single trace of hesitation or deceit. He eventually looked away and let out a cold laugh. I don't know what trick you're trying to pull, but these are your words. Let's go get the divorce certificate right now. And whoever backs out later, may they rot in hell. His words stung, but thankfully, I had already stopped caring about him. Besides, I truly wanted this divorce. There was no reason for me to back out. Lucas, afraid I might change my mind, threw down his chopsticks and dragged me straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Without any hesitation, we completed the paperwork and received the divorce certificate. As we stepped out of the office, Lucas held the certificate in his hand, grinning from ear to ear. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it, he said, chuckling. Susan Knight, you've really changed. I gave him a bitter smile. It's not that I've changed. I just don't love you anymore. Lucas, clearly in high spirits, didn't seem bothered by my words. Well, since you're the one who initiated the divorce, make sure you tell my parents the truth when you go back to pack your things. Don't try to make me look bad. I nodded calmly. Don't worry. I'll tell them exactly what happened. Satisfied, Lucas tucked the divorce certificate into his pocket and walked off, his steps light and carefree. I stood there, watching him disappear into the distance. I knew Lucas had gone to share the good news with Evelyn Reed, the sales associate at the department store. He truly loved her. Too bad for him. Lucas's parents didn't like her. They thought she was too headstrong and difficult to control. That's why they ignored his feelings and arranged for him to marry me, a girl from the countryside, with a marriage agreement made when we were children. But now, with me out of the picture, they could finally be together. Couldn't they? When I returned home, Karen Johnson was waiting for me with a frosty expression. Susan Knight, so you've decided to show up? On your first day back, you're already neglecting your duties. No lunch prepared. Nothing. If I'd known you were this lazy, I'd never have let you into this house. There she was again. Karen had always wielded her authority as Lucas's mother like a weapon, criticizing me constantly, even in my past life. When I took care of her and Robert after their car accident, left them bedridden for over 20 years. She never said a kind word to me. It was always scolding, blaming, and berating. But now, I was no longer her daughter-in-law, and I didn't have to endure her abuse. I knew the neighbors were likely eavesdropping from their homes. curious about the commotion. I met Karen's glare head-on and said, "Karen, are you planning to eat lunch at 10 a.m.? Karen froze, startled. "What?" I continued, undeterred. "No matter how wealthy the Johnsons are, you can't waste resources like this. Eating this many meals a day, even if you're slim, the pantry will run out of food." A snicker came from somewhere nearby. A neighbor clearly amused by my jab. Karen's face flushed bright red as she pointed a trembling finger at me. "Susan, how dare you call me a glutton? You've got no respect. And calling me Karen, like I'm some stranger? No manners. No upbringing. I should have just let Lucas marry Evelyn. At least she's a high school graduate with some class. Unlike you, a middle school dropout. Now kneel and apologize. Or I'll make Lucas divorce you." I almost laughed out loud at her bravado. Did she really think I was still the submissive, spineless girl she could bully? I met her gaze coolly and said, "Karen, there's no need for you to talk to Lucas about divorcing me, because we're already divorced." Karen's eyes widened in shock. I pulled the divorce certificate from my bag and held it out. "See? We just finalized it. I'm no longer your daughter-in-law. So from now on, don't expect me to cook, clean, or take care of the house anymore." Karen was speechless, staring at the certificate in disbelief. "You're really divorced? Good. Who would want you now? Lucas is such a good catch. You'll regret leaving him." Hearing the commotion, Robert Johnson rushed out of the house. He grabbed the certificate from Karen's hands and examined it carefully. The official red seal confirmed its authenticity. His face twisted in surprise as he turned to me. "Susan, did Lucas force you into this?" I shook my head and replied honestly, "No, Mr. Johnson. I made this decision myself. He doesn't like me, and staying together would only make us both miserable. Thank you for honoring the promise you made to my parents and letting Lucas marry me. But we're just not right for each other. I can't live up to the standards of being a Johnson. I'll pack my things and leave." Without waiting for a reply, I stepped into the house, quickly gathered the few pieces of clothing I had brought with me, and prepared to leave. After my parents passed away, I had no family left. When I came to the city to marry Lucas, I brought nothing but a few clothes. And now, I was leaving the same way. When I walked out of the Johnsons' gate with my bag in hand, the sunlight felt warmer than I remembered, as if it were welcoming me into a new chapter of my life. Karen grabbed my arm, her tone firm. "No, you can't leave. If you go, who will do all the housework?" Ever since I came to live with the Johnson family 6 months ago, Karen had stopped doing any chores herself. She treated my labor as a given. And now that it was cold, she was even less inclined to deal with icy water for cooking or laundry. She was desperate to keep me here. Too bad for her. I wasn't going to be their unpaid maid in this lifetime. I calmly pulled my arm away and pointed to Evelyn Reed, who had just arrived with Lucas. "Karen, didn't you say I'm uneducated and uncultured? Unfit to be your daughter-in-law? Look behind you. You're well-educated. Cultured daughter-in-law is here. Don't let her slip away this time." Karen's eyes lit up when she saw Evelyn. "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" Evelyn cast a shy glance at Lucas and replied softly, "I heard Lucas and Susan got divorced, so I came to talk to them. I thought I might be able to help." Karen sneered. "Help? There's nothing to talk about. It's great that they divorced. You're too kind-hearted, Evelyn. Not like some girls from the countryside who put on airs. I thought she'd be decent, but she turned out to be sharp-tongued and petty. She's not even a fraction of you." Hearing Karen's words, I caught the faint glimmer of satisfaction in Evelyn's eyes. Lucas, on the other hand, looked at me with an unreadable expression. "So, you're really leaving. Where will you go?" Before I could answer, Karen interjected, "Who cares where she goes? Good riddance. Someone as uncultured as her should stay far away. Lucas, take Evelyn inside. Why are you still standing here?" Karen ushered Evelyn into the house, then turned back to me and barked, "Why are you still here? Regretting it now? Too late. Lucas will never take you back." Her attitude made me rethink my earlier plan to warn her and Robert about staying home in the coming months. Why should I? Let them face their destiny. I grabbed my bag and walked out of the alley, stepping into my new life. I already knew where I was going. In my past life, Lucas despised me for being a country bumpkin with no education. To prove him wrong, I had poured all my free time into studying, eventually completing all my high school courses through night school. I had even planned to take the college entrance exam, but just before the test, Robert and Karen were in a severe car accident. They were left bedridden and needed constant care. I had no choice but to abandon my dreams to take care of them. But this time, no one could stop me. With the $10 I had saved from odd jobs, I rented a small room near the night school. During the day, I sold sunflower seeds, popsicles, and sodas outside a local movie theater. At night, I immersed myself in studying. In my previous life, even while caring for Lucas's parents, I had never given up on learning. I especially loved English and math, so studying at night school felt easy and familiar. I was determined to take the college entrance exam 6 months from now. My days became progressively better. This time, people were still hesitant to do business, so I had almost no competition. My little stall in front of the movie theater was the only one of its kind. In an era when most people earn just a few dollars a month, I was making $10 to $20 a day. As my savings grew, I finally understood why Lucas had been so eager to leave his factory job in my previous life. Doing business really was lucrative. Still, I wondered if, after the changes I'd made, Lucas and Evelyn had gone into business with that conman, Mr. Brown. I wouldn't have to wait long for an answer. One day, while I was selling snacks outside the theater, I suddenly heard a familiar voice. "Susan, what are you doing here with a stall?" I looked up and saw Evelyn Reed standing in front of my stall, dressed in a white dress. Her face was a picture of surprise. "Susan, I thought you went back to your hometown. I didn't expect to find you here, selling things on the street. You must be having a really hard time to resort to this. How much money can you even make selling popsicles for 5 cents each? Why not come work with Lucas and me selling clothes? We're looking for a sales assistant." It wasn't until she finished speaking that I noticed Lucas and Mr. Brown standing behind her. So it seemed that without me in the way, Lucas had indeed gone into business with Mr. Brown in this lifetime. Lucas frowned as he stepped closer. "What are you doing here? Selling things on the street? Aren't you embarrassed?" His words caught me off guard. I hadn't expected him to be so narrow-minded. I used to think Lucas was different from most people. Someone with courage and vision to quit his secure factory job to start a business. But hearing him talk now, I couldn't help but question how he ever managed to succeed in the past. Perhaps he was just a pig who happened to catch the wind. I replied calmly, "I'm not stealing or cheating. I earn money with my own hands. Why should I be embarrassed?" Lucas's expression darkened at my response, and he sneered. "A few days away from me, and you've become so sharp-tongued. Looks like someone's true nature is finally showing. Evelyn, don't bother offering her a job. We can't use such a bitter person as a sales assistant." Mr. Brown nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Sales assistants need to be polite. Someone like her would scare customers away and ruin your business." Their arrogance was almost laughable. I never said I wanted to be a sales assistant. Selling snacks on my own was far more profitable than working for someone else. Yet here they were, acting as if they were doing me a favor. Ignoring them, I turned to Evelyn. "That'll be 15 cents for the soda." Evelyn handed me 20 cents and said generously, "Keep the change." I calmly took out 5 cents and gave it back to her. "No need. You'll need the extra money for your business." Evelyn raised an eyebrow slightly at my gesture, then smiled. "Well, if you insist. Susan, you may speak harshly, but you mean well. Don't take Lucas's words to heart. Oh, by the way, we're getting married next month. If you're free, you should come to the wedding." So they were really getting married. Strangely, I felt no emotional reaction to the news. It didn't sting, didn't hurt. It simply was. Lucas, however, scowled deeply at Evelyn's words. "Why are you telling her that? If she actually shows up, she'll bring bad luck." Evelyn quickly feigned a look of disapproval. "Lucas, how could you say something like that? You'll hurt Susan's feelings." Lucas shot me a dark glare but didn't say anything else. I smiled faintly. Lucas is right. My presence would only spoil the mood. "Evelyn, I wish you both a happy marriage in advance, but I won't be attending the wedding." Evelyn's expression brightened at my response, satisfaction clear in her eyes. She had achieved what she came here for. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, she, Lucas, and Mr. Brown finally left together. I watched their backs as they walked away and did a quick mental calculation. By now, it shouldn't be long before Mr. Brown's deceit comes to light. I hoped he wouldn't move too quickly, though. I didn't want him ruining their wedding plans. I was genuinely curious to see if, after being scammed, Lucas and Evelyn would still be as close as they were in my past life. Time flew by, and my earnings kept growing. In addition to selling sunflower seeds and snacks outside the movie theater, I realized that young people were obsessed with movie stars. So, I started stocking up on their photos and posters to sell alongside my usual products. This small adjustment made my business even more successful. One evening, as I counted my earnings, I was amazed to find that I had saved 8.200 yuan. I was just a little shy of becoming one of those 10.000 yuan households. The sight of so much money nearly brought tears to my eyes. In my past life, I had worked as an unpaid maid for the Johnson family, rarely holding more than 200 yuan at a time. Even after Lucas became a big-shot businessman, he never gave me much money. To them, I was nothing more than a tool. A person who didn't need clothes, didn't need to shop, and didn't have desires. But I was human too. Now, I had earned all this money with my own hands, and there would only be more to come. I could finally buy the things I wanted for myself. That weekend, I arranged to go shopping with my night school classmate, Anna Zhou. She was my desk mate, an outspoken and cheerful girl who I got along with very well. As we strolled through the streets, Anna grabbed my hand excitedly. "Susan, you have to buy a few dresses today. Your figure is amazing, and it'd be such a waste not to show it off." I patted my plump wallet and nodded. "All right, I'll follow your advice." This time, the department store was still the main place for people to shop for clothes. However, their selection was monotonous, and their designs didn't appeal to many young women. On our way there, we came across a bustling clothing shop packed with customers. The store was full of the latest trends: denim jackets, flared pants, and floral dresses. "Wow, is this the famous Golden Phoenix clothing store everyone's been talking about?" Anna exclaimed. "Susan, we have to check it out." Before I could reply, Anna pulled me into the store, where we immediately ran into Karen Johnson. She froze when she saw me, then raised her voice. "What are you doing here? Do you think you can afford clothes like these? Get out. Stop taking up space. Can't you see how crowded it is?" Yes, the Golden Phoenix clothing store was owned by Lucas and Mr. Brown. Thanks to their collaboration, they had opened this store more than 6 months earlier than they had in my previous life. Anna's face flushed with anger at Karen's words. "What's wrong with you? How can you judge someone without even knowing them? How do you know we can't afford these clothes?" Karen raised her eyebrows and sneered. "I don't know about others. But her? Of course. I know her. She's just a country girl working odd jobs. How much can she earn in a month? One denim jacket here costs dozens of yuan. Do you think someone like her can afford that?" I almost laughed at Karen's arrogance. She still thought I was the same Susan from before. What she didn't know was that I could easily afford anything in her store now. But I wouldn't waste my money on their products. Those clothes would fade, shrink, and lose shape after just a few washes. Let her enjoy her pride for a few more days. Once people realized the poor quality of their clothes, their good days would be over. Anna was livid. "So what if she's from the countryside? Weren't your ancestors farmers too? How dare you look down on rural folks? I wouldn't want to shop at a store owned by someone like you." Karen scoffed and muttered. "Rude, uneducated people. No wonder you hang out with her. Unlike my current daughter-in-law. Our Evelyn is such a capable woman," Karen said smugly, her gaze filled with pride. "This store is all thanks to her helping Lucas get it up and running. Look at how well our business is doing. We're making so much money every day. You must be dying of envy now, aren't you?" She looked at me, clearly hoping to see regret or jealousy in my expression. But there was none. Absolutely none. Why would I envy someone on the verge of disaster? Evelyn noticed us and pulled Lucas over. "Susan, did you come to support our store?" she said with a sweet, self-satisfied smile. "But our clothes are a bit expensive. I'm afraid they might be out of your budget." Lucas gave me a disdainful once-over and added coldly, Susan Knight, we're not on the same path anymore. Don't come here and disrupt our lives. The clothes here aren't something you can afford. Evelyn lightly patted Lucas on the arm and said, Don't be so harsh. At least show Susan a little respect. She's with her friend. Hearing this, Anna Jo couldn't hold back her anger. What kind of green tea nonsense is this? She snapped. Susan, let's go. Even if we had money to spare, I wouldn't waste it on people like them. Karen laughed mockingly. Go on. Then. Don't get in the way of my business. Shoo, you penniless peasants. Once we left the store, Anna continued ranting, especially after realizing that Lucas was the ex-husband I'd told her about before. She unleashed a torrent of curses at him, sparing no words. This family is disgusting. Susan, how are you not furious right now? I smiled faintly. What's there to be angry about? I don't care about them at all anymore. Getting mad over them would only pollute my mood. Anna, we came out today to enjoy ourselves. Let's not let them ruin our day. Anna gave me a serious look, then suddenly burst into laughter. That's why I admire you. Susan, your attitude is inspiring. You're right. Why let trash ruin our mood? Let's keep shopping. We headed toward the department store, but as we passed the Golden Phoenix, we noticed a small, inconspicuous clothing store across the street. Curious, we decided to check it out. Despite the modest size of the store, the clothes inside were surprisingly nice. They had denim jackets and floral dresses, just like the Golden Phoenix. And the designs weren't any less trendy. But while the Golden Phoenix was packed with customers, this store was eerily quiet in comparison. The young man behind the counter, wearing glasses, greeted us warmly. Take your time. Ladies, feel free to try anything on. I couldn't help but ask. Your clothes are just as nice as the ones across the street. Why is your business so much slower? The man scratched his head helplessly. That's exactly the problem. They're similar. But compared to the store across the street, my prices are higher. The truth is, these clothes cost me a lot to source. With the shipping fees, rent, and other costs, I'm barely breaking even at these prices. I have no idea how they're able to sell their clothes so cheaply and still make a profit. The man let out a heavy sigh. I'm about to lose everything. Ladies, if there's anything you need, take it now. After today, I'm closing this store for good. I can't keep it open any longer. If I don't shut down, I won't even be able to pay the rent. I ran my hand over the clothes on the rack, noticing the excellent quality of each piece. It would be a shame if the store closed, especially since it only needed to hang on a little longer. Golden Phoenix was bound to collapse soon. An idea suddenly struck me. What if you don't close? We could partner up and run the store together. The man's head shot up in surprise. Partner up? Are you serious? I'm losing so much money I might as well jump into a river. And you want to partner with me? I picked up a high-quality floral dress and replied firmly. Yes, I'm serious. Your merchandise is good. And your suppliers are reliable. I can invest to keep the store open. I thought of the elegant, upscale women's boutiques I'd seen in shopping malls in my past life and added, maybe we could even renovate the store to attract more customers. At first, the man was skeptical, but when I pulled out a wad of cash, his doubt disappeared. We discussed the terms and agreed to split the store's shares 50-50. Anna, who had been silently watching, was stunned. Wait a minute. Don't leave me out. I want in too. Her enthusiasm made me smile. Anna's father was the head of the local commerce bureau, and her mother was a deputy manager at the department store. With her connections, getting licenses and permits would be a breeze. Since she was genuinely interested, I was more than happy to include her. Anna didn't want to invest much, so we decided on the following split. Anna would take 20% of the shares, while the man and I would each keep 40%. When we started drafting the formal contract, it occurred to me that I didn't even know the man's name. Sorry, I said sheepishly. I got so excited earlier that I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Susan Knight. The man chuckled. I'm Victor Success. Victor Success? From Hawthorne Alley. Victor nodded. That's me. Do you know me? I shook my head and then nodded, a smile creeping across my face. How could I not recognize the name Victor Success? In my past life, he had been even more successful than Lucas, becoming one of the wealthiest men in the region. He was also Lucas's sworn rival. Lucas hated him so much it made his teeth ache. But he could never outdo Victor. He had no choice but to watch Victor rise to prominence. I couldn't help but laugh to myself. What were the odds that I'd accidentally choose Lucas's biggest rival, and a future tycoon, as my business partner? It seemed like leaving the Johnson family had brought me nothing but good luck. Once the contract was finalized, the three of us got to work. Anna took charge of getting permits and supplies, while I provided the funding and handled the renovation plans. As we threw ourselves into transforming the store, the Golden Phoenix across the street began facing its inevitable downfall. Customers who had paid premium prices for their clothes quickly discovered that the garments shrank, lost shape, or faded after just a few wears. Furious, they stormed the store, demanding refunds. Victor watched the chaos from our side of the street and sighed in relief. No wonder their prices were so low. Their stock was defective. Susan, it's a good thing you stopped me from closing. Otherwise, I'd have missed this opportunity. I smiled and nodded. Yes, our time to make money is just beginning. Not long after, the authorities received reports about the poor quality of the Golden Phoenix's products. Officials arrived to shut the store down. On the day of the closure, Karen was sprawled on the ground, wailing and causing a scene. But her tantrum couldn't stop the inevitable. The Golden Phoenix's doors were sealed shut, marking the end of its short-lived success. I stood in front of our newly renovated store, watching Karen angrily hitting Evelyn while shouting at her, "You're nothing but bad luck. If it weren't for you, my son wouldn't have quit his stable factory job and wasted all our savings starting a business with that scammer. Mr. Brown, look at what you've done to us with this batch of defective goods. You've ruined us." Evelyn, who just days ago had been full of pride, now hid behind Lucas, her face streaked with tears. But to my surprise, Lucas didn't shield her. Instead, he occasionally held her still, making it easier for Karen to land her blows. Watching this scene from across the street, I couldn't help but laugh. So much for their unbreakable love. When it came down to money and survival, they were just like anyone else. Self-preservation came first. On the day Golden Phoenix officially shut its doors, our Red Rose boutique held its grand opening. I had designed the store to resemble the upscale boutiques I remembered from my past life, with a polished and elegant interior that appealed to women at first sight. Naturally, our business thrived from the very start. Karen and Lucas came to retrieve the last of their belongings from Golden Phoenix. As they passed by Red Rose Boutique, Evelyn stared at the store's beautiful interior with envy. "This place is gorgeous. Lucas, if we hadn't trusted the wrong person, our second store wouldn't have been any worse than this." Lucas's face darkened, and he stayed silent. Karen let out a harsh laugh. "You think you'll ever succeed in business? We've already lost everything. If you so much as mention starting another business, I'll break your legs." Evelyn's face flushed with embarrassment at being scolded in public. She looked crestfallen. But before Karen could berate her further, she noticed me standing at the boutique's entrance, welcoming customers. Karen marched over, sneering. "So, you've resorted to working as a sales clerk here? How pathetic." Anna, standing beside me, immediately fired back. "Oh, isn't this the family of failures who just had their store shut down? Your own lives are in ruins, and you still have the nerve to mock others." Karen snorted arrogantly. "So what if we failed? At least we've been bosses before. Unlike you two, who are doomed to be clerks for life." Anna laughed so hard she had to cover her mouth. "Clerks? Open your eyes. Karen, Susan and I aren't clerks. We're the owners of Red Rose Boutique. This entire store is ours." 3 gasps of disbelief filled the air. Lucas and Evelyn stared at me, wide-eyed. Lucas turned to me, his voice shaking. "Susan, you're the owner of this store." I nodded calmly. "That's right. This store belongs to me." Evelyn's voice turned shrill. "Impossible. Lucas and I couldn't even make Golden Phoenix this good. How could you possibly open such a high-end boutique?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe it's because I don't look down on people." Evelyn's face turned ghostly pale. Lucas's gaze shifted uneasily as he looked at me, his thoughts unclear. But it didn't matter to me anymore. The store was bustling with customers, and I had work to do. After all, I was determined to make a lot of money. As I walked back inside, Karen muttered behind me, "A country girl like her owning such a big store? Who knows what shady means she used? Disgusting." Evelyn echoed her disdain with a huff, while Lucas stood silently, his usual look of condescension toward me noticeably absent. Red Rose Boutique flourished. Since Anna and I were busy with school, we couldn't be at the store often, so Victor hired additional staff to help manage the day-to-day operations. Time flew by, and before I knew it, the day of the college entrance exams arrived. Walking out of the exam hall, I looked up at the clear blue sky and let out a long breath of relief. I felt good about my performance, especially in math and English, my favorite subjects. I knew I had done well this time. I was confident I'd get into a good university. Anna came bouncing over, throwing her arms around me. "Susan, I think I did pretty well too. Thanks to you helping me with English. This time, I'll definitely get into college and finally make my parents proud." "That would be amazing," I said, smiling. This lifetime, not only had I worked toward fulfilling my own dreams, but I had also helped my friends achieve theirs. It made me incredibly happy. After the exams, Anna and I finally had some time to help out at Red Rose Boutique. By now, both of us were small, 10,000 yuan households. We started planning how to manage our business while attending university together. "Let's stick together and keep building this business," Anna said excitedly. Victor chimed in with enthusiasm. "Count me in. You two can't leave me out. We're the dream team. We do everything together." I laughed and nodded. "Of course. You're in. With Victor on board, we're in good hands." He had a knack for running the store. And since Anna and I wouldn't have much time once school started, having him manage things was the perfect solution. After all, he was destined to become a business tycoon. Life was becoming more comfortable with each passing day. But some people just couldn't stand seeing others succeed. One morning, I headed to the store to open up, only to hear Anna and Victor yelling furiously from afar. "Who the hell did this? If I find out, they're dead," Anna screamed, hurrying to the store. I was met with a horrifying sight. The front of the store had been doused in filth, with vulgar graffiti scrawled across the walls and doors. Rage coursed through me, making my entire body tremble. Anna grabbed my hand. "Susan, don't look. It's just jealousy. This has to be your awful ex-mother-in-law's doing." I clenched Anna's hand tightly. "I know it's her. There's no one else it could be. And I won't let her get away with it." I called the police. Anna's uncle, the local police chief, didn't take kindly to hearing that someone had deliberately targeted his niece's store. Within 3 days, they had evidence and hauled Karen into the station. When offered the chance to mediate, I refused. Karen was sentenced to 15 days in detention. Lucas showed up with reddened eyes, pleading with me. "Susan, we were once husband and wife. Can't you forgive her just this once?" I thought of all the cruel words he had thrown at me in my past life and sneered. "Lucas, there's no bond between us anymore. And I owe you nothing. Your mother's actions deserve punishment." Karen wailed loudly. "You filthy wench. I was right about you. How else could a country bumpkin like you own such a nice store if you weren't doing shady things?" I looked at her coldly. "Keep shouting. Slander me all you want. I don't mind letting you stay locked up longer. Who knows? Maybe you'll end up serving a full sentence." Karen faltered, her voice dying down. She had finally realized I was no longer the submissive daughter-in-law she could push around. Lucas stood silently, his expression heavy. "Susan, you've really changed." I met his gaze with a smile. "So have you." And it was true. This lifetime, without me, Lucas hadn't improved at all. In fact, he seemed worse off than before. It was almost pitiful. The next time I heard about the Johnson family, it was from Anna. "Did you hear? Your charming ex-mother-in-law is paralyzed now. Actually, both of them are." I raised an eyebrow. "Was it a car accident?" Anna shook her head. "Sort of. But not exactly. After Golden Phoenix went under, Evelyn tried to start another business. But Karen didn't approve and constantly beat and tormented her. Your ex-husband didn't defend her either. Evelyn finally had enough and decided to run away. She took the last bit of their money and planned to move to Shenzhen to start fresh. But while trying to sneak out, Karen and Robert caught her. They chased Evelyn into the street, where she shoved them into the path of an oncoming truck. The collision left both of them paralyzed. So that's what happened. I thought they might avoid their fate since the accident hadn't occurred before my college exams this time around. But in the end, nothing had changed. They were still paralyzed. And it was all thanks to their beloved daughter-in-law, Evelyn. With Lucas's blind devotion to his parents, he was now stuck caring for them for the rest of his life. A month later, my college entrance exam results were released. Both Anna and I did well, and we applied to universities in Shanghai, the future international metropolis brimming with endless opportunities. I was determined to seize every single one of them. When our acceptance letters arrived, Anna and I were sitting in Red Rose Boutique, discussing business expansion plans with Victor. We were brainstorming ideas to start a renovation company, inspired by the success of our boutique. As housing development grew in the future, renovation businesses would boom alongside real estate. Our boutique's stylish interior had already attracted clients asking us to design their stores, making this the perfect next step. I held my red acceptance letter in one hand while talking with Anna about potential locations for the new business. Suddenly, Lucas appeared, pushing his paralyzed parents in wheelchairs. His eyes were red as he looked at me. "Susan, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Can you come back?" I froze, taken aback. Before Lucas could say anything more, Karen burst into tears. "Susan, I was wrong. Evelyn is useless. She's nothing but a pampered city girl who doesn't know how to take care of anyone. Your father-in-law and I are in such a terrible state, and she can't even cook for us. I've already kicked her out. Please, come back and be our daughter-in-law again. Without you, our family has only gone downhill. You're our lucky star. I'm begging you to come back and take care of us." Lucas added sincerely, "Susan, please. I've realized that you're the only one I truly love." Their audacity made me laugh out loud. "Get lost. Do you really think I'd come back to be your unpaid maid again?" Karen's eyes bulged with anger. "How can you speak to me like that? Susan, divorced women don't have many options, especially rural ones like you. No education, no class. Even if you have some money now, people still look down on you. We're willing to take you back. You should be grateful." I smirked. "Take me back? Karen, I'm a college student, the owner of this boutique, and a wealthy, educated woman. I don't need your pity. You want me to return and be your servant? Dream on. Now get out of here." Lucas pushed his parents away, his face pale and full of despair. He couldn't understand how I had transformed into someone so successful after our divorce. It was as if I were a completely different person. As I watched them leave, I smiled faintly. The man I had once looked up to now had to look up to me. How satisfying. In September, Anna and I started college together, while continuing to work with Victor on our businesses. We launched our renovation company and ventured into real estate. With branch offices spreading across the country, our profits soared as the years went by. Meanwhile, Lucas and Evelyn ended up back together. With his parents bedridden, finding another wife was nearly impossible for Lucas. The burden of caring for them left the two exhausted, with no energy to pursue any ambitions or business ventures. As for me, I rode the tide of the era, leading Anna and Victor to massive success. By the turn of the millennium, I became the wealthiest person in the nation. On that very day, Victor proposed to me with an enormous diamond ring. I looked at the ring and shook my head with a smile. "You're amazing, Victor. But I don't want to get married." Victor was stunned. "Why not?" "Because I'm happy being single. Life as a wealthy, independent woman is too joyful to give up. Why would I lock myself into a marriage again? In this life, I only wanted to live for myself. And I did. Happily and freely."